I pulled into the driveway. My heart is racing, the niggling hunch that had followed me during my work trip refused to leave. Valerie's SMS message, clearly not intended for me, kept playing back in my head. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what I could discover inside our home. As I stepped out of the car, the calm of the area felt stifling. Our house remained silent. There are no traces of life apparent on the outside. I slid my key into the lock, and the click echoed in the silence. "Valerie," I called out. My voice remained firm despite the tumult within me. No response. I moved throughout the home. My footsteps were muffled by the thick carpet. The living room was empty. The kitchen remains unchanged. The tiny sound drew my attention. A quiet splash of water comes from the backyard. My hand hesitated on the patio door handle. A part of me wanted to turn back and pretend I hadn't heard anything, but I could not. I needed to know. I slid open the door quietly. The warm evening air struck my face. The splashing became louder, accompanied by low murmurs and laughs. I strolled onto the terrace, my gaze drawn to the jacuzzi. There they were. Valerie, my wife of 5 years, and her boss, Nicholas Bailey, naked and intimate, oblivious to my presence. For a little period I was unable to breathe. The betrayal struck me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless. But while I observed them, something within me stiffened. The hurt turned into a cold, calculated anger. I cleared my throat aloud. "Isn't this cozy?" Valerie swung her head around, her eyes widening. And horror. "Philip, you got home early." Nicholas had the nerve to smirk. His arm remained draped across my wife's shoulders. "Harrington, this is awkward." I laughed, but the sound was empty of humor. "Awkward? Is that what you call sleeping with my wife in my own house?" Valerie. Shock transformed into defiance. She stood up. Water cascaded down her body with no attempt to cover herself. "Oh, Philip, don't act so astonished. Did you really believe your poor attempts in bed would be enough to satisfy me?" Her statements were intended to pain and emasculate, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of a response. Instead, I turned to Nicholas. "And you? I guess screwing your employees' wives is a workplace bonus." Nicholas chuckled and stood up as well. "Come on, Harrington. You can't blame a man for accepting what he's provided, especially when it's so willing." I felt a surge of repulsion, but I maintained an emotionless expression. "You two appear to have forgotten something very crucial." Valerie rolled her eyes. "And what about it, Philip? What are your feelings?" I smiled, a cold predatory gaze that made both of them hesitate. "No, Valerie. The security cameras." Faces paled simultaneously. I took out my phone and tapped the screen several times. I had a hunch something like this was going to happen, so I added some extra security measures. High-definition cameras, excellent night vision. They capture everything. Nicholas stepped forward, his arrogance giving way to panic. "Now, Harrington, let us avoid making impulsive decisions." I ignored him as my finger hovered over the call button. "I am curious what your wife would think of this little display." Nicholas, before he could react, I hit the call button. The phone rang twice before Marion's face showed on screen. "Philip, is everything okay?" I turned the phone to give her a clear view of the jacuzzi and its occupants. "I apologize. Marion, I thought you should see this." Marion's gasp was loud and her eyes filled with tears. "Nicholas, how could you?" Nicholas lunged for the phone, but I moved back to Keep it out of his reach. Marion, I can explain. I stopped the conversation and pocketed my phone. I believe she got the picture, don't you? Valerie and Nicholas stood there, drenched and exposed. Their arrogance crumbled. I felt terrible satisfaction from their agony. Philip, Valerie began with a conciliatory tone. We can discuss this. It does not have to end our marriage. I laughed. The sound is harsh and unrelenting. Oh, Valerie, it does. It ended the minute you chose to betray me. I want you both out of my house right now. Nicholas grabbed a towel and wrapped it over his waist. You are making a mistake, Harrington. I can make your life extremely difficult. I met his eyes unflinchingly. Try it. Bailey, I challenge you. As they rushed to recover their garments, I turned and returned to the house. My hands remained steady as I poured myself a drink. The ice clinked on the glass, providing a contrast to the sounds of hurried footsteps and slamming doors. When silence fell again, I took out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Travis, it's Philippe. I need your help. Travis's anxious voice came through as I stood in the kitchen, phone to ear. Philip, what is happening on? Valerie has been cheating on me. I spoke calmly, despite the storm burning inside me with her boss, Nicholas Bailey. There was a sudden intake of breath on the other end. Shit, man, I'm so sorry. What do you need? I took a sip of my whiskey and enjoyed the burn. I need a pal and I need someone who can think strategically. Can you come over? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Travis responded without hesitation while I waited for him. I recreated the scene in the jacuzzi, dissecting every detail in the same way Valerie teased me. The arrogant expression on Nicholas' face. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened the door to see Travis, his face etched with concern. Philippe, he whispered, bringing me into a brief but strong hug. I can't believe what happened to you. I moved aside, gesturing for him to enter. Neither can I, but here we are. We settled into the living room and I recounted the events of the evening. Travis listened closely. His gaze darkened as I detailed Valerie and Nicholas' actions. He murmured. Those bastards. When I finished. What are you planning to do? I leaned forwards, my gaze meeting his. I'm going to destroy them, Travis, both of them. And I need your support to do so. Travis nodded slowly, a determined look in his eyes. You've got this, man. Whatever you need. My phone just broke. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from Valerie. Philippe, please, we need to discuss this. This was a mistake. I love you. I showed Travis the note and he scoffed. She has some nerve. Indeed, I agreed and typed up my response. There is nothing to talk about, Valerie. I will be filing for divorce. Do not contact me again. In one fast action, I pushed the send button and blocked her number. Travis lifted his eyebrow. That is it. There is no spectacular encounter. I shake my head. That is what she wants. A chance to exploit me and act the victim. I will not offer her satisfaction. Travis nodded. So, what is the plan? I rose up, pacing the room while I organized my thoughts. First, we need information. I want to know everything about Nicholas Bailey, including his finances, business transactions, and dirty secrets. If he's willing to sleep with his employees' wife, I'm guessing there's more dirt to uncover. Travis grabbed out his phone, his fingers speeding across the keyboard. I know this person. Shannon Hayes. She is a private investigator. Best in the business. Want me to call her? Do it. I told her money is no object. I want to know all she can find out about Bailey. As Travis placed the call, I proceeded to plot. We will need allies. Nicholas's other employees, possibly others he's cheated in business agreements. And Mary and his wife, she deserves to know the entire scope of his betrayal. Travis terminated the call with a delighted smile on his face. Shannon is on board. She will begin digging first thing tomorrow. Excellent, I said, a frigid smile growing across my face. Now let's talk about how we're going to use that jacuzzi film over the following few hours. Travis and I planned for every move and contingency. By the time he left, the sun had risen above the horizon. But I felt more awake than ever as I stood in the doorway, watching Travis drive away. A sense of serenity came over me. The pain of betrayal was still present. A deep ache in my chest was masked by a steely determination. Valerie and Nicholas believed they could disgrace me, break me. They were about to discover how mistaken they were. I closed the door. My thoughts are already racing with the following steps in my strategy. The game was on and I planned to win. The house seemed different today, contaminated by the knowledge of what had happened. I went around the rooms painstakingly collecting Valerie's possessions. Each item I touched increased my rage, reminding me of her treachery. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from Valerie, Nicholas, as well as a few common friends who had somehow learned about the news. I disregarded them all and concentrated on the task at hand. The doorbell rang while I was packaging up. Valerie close. I stiffened up, racing for a confrontation. But as I opened the door, Marion was standing there. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. Philip, she spoke barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure where else to go. I stepped aside and let her in. Come inside, Marion. I'm sorry you had to find out in that way. She nodded and moved into the living room, sliding into the couch. I'd always suspected, but I didn't want to believe it. I sat across from her, observing her intently. What are you planning to do? Marion straightened up, a look of determination on her face. I've already called my lawyer. I'll file for divorce first thing Monday morning. Good, I replied, nodding in approval. You are worth more than that jerk. She stared at me. Her gaze sharpened. And how about you, Philip? What are you planning to do? I leaned back, a frigid smile flashing over my lips. I'm going to make them regret ever crossing me. Marion did not flinch at my comments. Instead, she leaned forwards. Her voice was low and powerful. I want to be involved in whatever you have planned. I want to help. I raised an eyebrow and reassessed her. Perhaps Marion had more steel than I had given her credit for. This may turn ugly. She nodded. Her jaw was fixed. Nicholas does not get out of this unscathed. There was a bustle outside. I stepped to the window and looked out to find Valerie standing on the front lawn, calling my name. Philip, I know you are in there. We need to talk. I turned to Marion. It appears that it is show time. We stepped out onto the porch together to present a united face. Valerie's eyes brightened when she saw Marion, then narrowed in rage. What's she doing here? Valerie spit. I ignored her query. I thought I had told you not to contact me again. Valerie. Valerie stepped forward, her voice begging. Philip, please, this was a mistake. I love you. We can work through it. I laughed. The sound rough and uncompromising. Love me. You have a funny way of expressing it. Was it love when you slept with Nicholas in our jacuzzi? Was it love when you mocked me? They called me pathetic. Valerie flinched. Her facade is disintegrating. I did not mean those things. I was just. Save it. I shut her off. I'm not interested in your justifications or lies. You made your decision. Valerie. Now you have to deal with the repercussions. What are the consequences? She demanded, changing her tone from appealing to defensive. Philip, you cannot do anything to me. It's your word. Versus ours. I smiled, chilly and predatory. Oh, but it's not just my word, right? There is video. Evidence. Remember, how do you expect your family to respond when they see it, your friends and colleagues? Valerie's face lost its color. You wouldn't dare to try me. I challenged. You appear to have forgotten who I am. Valerie, I'm not a pushover that you can manipulate and trash. Do you want a war? I will give you one. Marion stepped forward. Her voice is solid and he will not be fighting alone. Valerie looked between us. Her eyes widened with realization. For the first time, I noticed terror there. This is not over. She continued, but her tone lacked conviction. I nodded. You're correct about that. It's merely the beginning. As Valerie went to her car, I turned to Marion. Are you prepared for this? She nodded with a fierce spark in her eyes. More than ready. Let us make them pay. We returned inside, locking the door behind Valerie's fleeing form. The parts were falling into place. The stage was prepared for what was to follow. Valerie and Nicholas had no idea what was going to happen, but they would find out shortly. They'd realized the full gravity of their error and I'd be there to see them collapse. 2 days after my argument with Valerie, I sat down at my desk, phone in hand. Shannon Hayes' number glowed on the screen. Mr. Harrington, I pressed call. Determination pouring through me. Shannon's clear voice responded. I have some intriguing results for you. I'm all ears, Miss Hayes. I said, reclining back in my chair. Nicholas Bailey isn't as clean as his public persona implies, Gainan began. I discovered proof of a fraudulent plan from his early career. He has gone to tremendous measures to hide it. My lips curved into a frigid smile. Excellent work. Could you please provide me all of the details that are already on their way to your email? Shannon responded. What are your next steps? I have some ideas. I said, keep digging. I also want to know everything about his current business operations. After hanging up, I dialed Travis. He responded on the first ring. Philip, what is the latest? We have dirt on Bailey. I said. I need you to contact several of his staff. Find out who's upset and who he screwed over. Travis gave out a low whistle. You're not kidding around, are you? They brought this upon themselves. I replied. My voice harsh. Are you still with me? All the way? Travis reassured me. I'll start calling. As I hung up, a tap on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Marion standing there with a determined expression in her eyes. I've been thinking, she explained as she walked in. We need to strike Nicholas where it hurts the most. His repute. I motioned for her to continue as we moved into the living room. Marion sat down and said that he values his image more Then anything else. What if we exposed him to everyone instead of just a few? A gradual smile appeared on my face. What did you have in mind? Marian leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. The jacuzzi video. We send it to his coworkers, relatives, and everyone. It's risky, I thought. We could face legal consequences. Marian said, not if we do it anonymously. I know a technician who can assist us hide our tracks. I nodded. I am impressed by her initiative. Okay, let's do it. But we have to timing it. Right? Hit them when they're least expecting it. Just then, my phone vibrated with an email. Notice. It was from Shannon. Contains all of the details about Nicholas' fraud scheme. Marian. I said, glancing up from my phone. How would you like to help bring down your soon-to-be ex-husband's career? Her eyes widened as I showed her the email. Is this real? I nodded with each syllable. And we planned to use it to destroy him. We spent the next 3 hours organizing our chat. Interrupted by calls from Travis providing updates on his progress. By dark, we had a good plan in place. Remember what I said to Marian before she left? We need to be patient. Timing is everything. She nodded, a stern expression in her eyes. They will not know what hit them. As I closed the door behind her, I felt a rush of excitement. The game was underway and I held all of the cards. Valerie and Nicholas had no idea what was waiting for them. I poured myself a glass and raised it in a quiet toast of vengeance. Served icy cold, days went into weeks as our strategy unfurled. I put myself into work, launching a new business with the money from my late grandma. It functioned as both a distraction and a tool of carrying out my revenge. One crisp morning as I sat in my new office overlooking the city, my phone rang. It was Shannon. Mr. Harrington, she said, her voice full of joy. I've got something major planned. I leaned forwards, my interest piqued. What did you find? Remember Bailey's earlier scam scheme? Well, it never truly ended. He has been cooking the books for years, siphoning off firm funds to offshore accounts. A gradual smile appeared on my face. Can you prove it? I have documentation. Bank transfers, everything. Shannon responded. It's unbreakable. Excellent work. I said, send me everything you have. As soon as I hung up, I called Travis. It is time. When he responded, I told him that we were ready to go. Travis, his voice was full of expectation. What exactly is going on? I said that the authorities had received an anonymous tip. Then we sit back and watch the fireworks. Later that day, Marian and I met at a tiny cafe downtown. Her eyes lit up with delight as I told her about Shannon's discovery. So is this it? She inquired. Her voice low. Are we really doing this? I nodded. Nicholas Bailey is about to have an extremely horrible day. We spent the next hour discussing the last elements of our plan. Marian grabbed my arm as we were leaving. Philip, she spoke seriously. Thank you for everything. I gave her a slight smile. We are in this together, Marian, until the end. The next morning I awoke early. Adrenaline is racing through my veins. Today I made the anonymous call to the authorities. My voice was muffled. And I only provided enough information to launch an investigation. Then I waited. It did not take long. By mid-afternoon news had spread of a big fraud probe at Nicholas's company. From my workplace, I watched the drama unfold across all news channels. My phone vibrated with a text message from Travis. It is happening. Bailey is being led out of the building by police. I gave myself a moment of delight before responding. Excellent. It's time for phase 2. While Nicholas was distracted with the fraud investigation, Marion came up with the idea for phase 2. We would release the jacuzzi video. The timing was excellent. Multiple hits leave no time to recover. I called Marion. Are you ready? More than ready, she replied with a firm voice. Let us do this. With a few clicks, the film was anonymously distributed to Nicholas, his co-workers, family members, and various gossip websites. The aftermath was swift and severe. By evening, Nicholas Bailey's life had been ruined. Arrested for fraud, publicly humiliated, his reputation is in shambles, and this was merely the beginning. I felt satisfied as I sat in my living room watching the mayhem on the news. Valerie and Nicholas had believed they could break me. Instead, I'd broken them. My telephone rang. It was Valerie. What did you do? She shouted as soon as I responded. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I responded quietly. Don't play dumb. She hissed. I know it was you. Fraud investigation. The video. It has your fingerprints all over it. I chuckled coldly and mercilessly. Prove it. When Valerie spoke again, there was a brief quiet on the other end. Her voice trembled. Philip, please, we can work it out. I will do anything. Anything. I emphasized my voice. Then suffer, Valerie. Suffer as I did when I saw you with him. Suffer knowing that your actions caused this, and know that I'm only getting started. I hung up, interrupting her objections as I set the phone down. I did not feel any remorse. No second thoughts. They'd made their selections. Now they would have to deal with the repercussions. The game wasn't over yet, but I was winning and planned to see it through to the bitter end. The weeks following Nicholas's arrest were frenzy of action. As promised, I filed for divorce from Valerie. My lawyers have overwhelming evidence of her cheating. She attempted to fight it, but her attempts were unsuccessful. One sunny morning, I sat across from my lawyer, Robert, as he explained the terms of the divorce settlement. Philip Roberts claimed she's asking for half of everything. His tone was unfavorable despite the prenup. I leaned back in my chair, a frigid smile spreading across my lips. Allow her to try. Robert lifted his eyebrow. You seem unconcerned about this. That's because I have all of the cards, I responded. Show her the evidence that we have obtained. All of it. Robert's eyes widened as he thumbed through the file I handed him. This is thorough. You intend to use all of this? I nodded. My determination firm. Every last thing. I want her to know precisely what she is up against. Later in the day, my phone rang. It was Robert. So I asked, already knowing the answer. She folded. Robert said with a note of awe in his voice. Accepted the prenuptial agreement's initial provisions without argument. The majority of your assets will remain in the house. She walks out with barely a suitcase. I gave myself a moment of satisfaction. Excellent work. Robert, let's finish this as soon as feasible. As I hung up, my computer's ping drew my attention. It was an email notification regarding a property sale. I grinned when I read the details. Everything was falling into place. The following day, I drove to a little area across town. I pulled up to a tiny house. A great cry from Valerie's opulent lifestyle. But it would be her new home since she couldn't afford anything nicer. As I got out of the car, I noticed her observing me through the window. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her face was pallid. Good. Let her suffer. I strolled past her home to the one next door. I sold signs and stood confidently in the front yard. My new property. Valerie walked out onto her porch while I was checking the yard. "What are you doing here, Philip?" I turned to her. My face expressionless. "Why? I'm Valerie, your new neighbor. Didn't you notice the color fade from her face? You cannot be serious." "Oh, but I am," I responded. My tone icy. "I figured it'd be nice to keep an eye on you. Make sure you're adjusting well to your new situation." She took a step toward me. Her voice begging. "Philip, please, haven't you accomplished enough? I have lost everything." I met her eyes unaffected by her tears. "No, Valerie, you gave away everything. The moment you chose to betray me, this is merely a result of your activities." Valerie shouted out desperately as I turned to leave. "How about the house? What about our house? Are you planning to sell it?" I paused, giving her a wicked smile. "Oh, no, I am keeping it. In fact, I'm considering adding a new jacuzzi. What are your thoughts?" The sight of complete anguish on her face was all I needed. I got into my car and drove away, leaving Valerie standing devastated and alone as I drove home. I considered the next phase of my plan. A billboard. It was extreme, maybe even cruel. But when I remembered Valerie's ridicule and Nicholas' smug expression, I felt my resolve grow stronger. They had not shown any mercy. Why should I? I turned into my driveway, the home looming ahead of me. Our residence. This is my house currently. As I came inside, I felt a sense of calm come over me. The demons of betrayal that had plagued these halls were dying, replaced with a satisfaction of revenge. Well executed. My phone vibrated with a text message from Travis. "How did things go with Valerie?" I smiled as I composed my response flawlessly. "She is broken, but we are not finished yet." Travis replied shortly. "A billboard." I confirmed the billboard. It's time to ensure that they never forget what they did. I laid my phone down. I surveyed the vacant house for the first time since that awful night. I felt completely at peace. Valerie and Nicholas had attempted to destroy me. Instead, I had emerged from the ashes of their betrayal stronger and more determined than before. The game hadn't ended yet, but I was winning, and I planned to enjoy every second of it. The early sun created long shadows across my grass as I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the installation crew work. The billboard was enormous, filling the space between my new home and Valerie's modest apartment. As the workers raised the image into position, I experienced a flush of frigid contentment. Travis approached in his car, stepping out with a low whistle. "Damn, Philip, you were serious about going big." I turned to him with a smile on my face. "Go big or go home." "Right." He joined me on the porch looking at the advertisement. "Are you sure about this? It's fairly intense." "Absolutely." I responded without hesitation. They made their decisions. They now have to live with the consequences. We watched the technicians finish securing the photograph. A high-resolution image from the jacuzzi. Valerie and Nicholas were captured on video at their moment of treachery, which is written in bold letters underneath. "Remember this. How long till Valerie sees it? What do you think? Travis inquired. And as if on cue, a scream rang out from next door. We turned to see Valerie stumble out of her house, her eyes wide with dread as she noticed the advertisement. "Philip," she screamed and stormed towards us. "What the hell is this?" I slowly sipped my coffee. "Good morning, Valerie. I see you have spotted the new addition to the neighborhood." She approached the boundary of my property, her face distorted with fury and humiliation. "Take it down now." "I'm afraid I can't do that," I said calmly. "I own this property. Thus I can do whatever I want with it." "You cannot do this," she yelled. Her voice cracked. It is illegal." Travis walked forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Actually, it is not. We checked. As long as it is on private property and does not include blatant nudity, it's completely legal." Valerie's eyes flashed between us, despair etched on her features. "Philip, please, I understand. I have harmed you, but this goes too far." I placed down my coffee. I met her stare with steel in my eyes. "Too far? Was it too much when you mocked me in our home? You breached our promises without thinking twice." "Oh, no, Valerie, this is far enough. I will sue you," she threatened weakly. "I will find a method to get you to take it down." I laughed, but the sound was empty of humor. "Go ahead and try. But remember, I have the entire video. Push me, and I may decide. The entire world needs to see it." The fight seems to drain out of her. Then she slumped. Tears were flowing down her face. "Why are you doing this? Haven't I lost enough?" "Not nearly enough," I responded harshly. "You took everything from me, Valerie. My trust, love, and future. Now I am taking everything from you. Your reputation, comfort, and peace of mind. Fair is fair." She opened her mouth to reply, but I shut her off. "Save it. I am not interested in your excuses or tears. You made your bed. Now lie in it. Every day you peek out the window. I want you to remember what you threw away." With that, I turned away from her and entered the home, Travis following closely behind. As I shut the door, Valerie's cries faded into the background. Travis gazed at me with astonishment and anxiety. "That was freezing, dude. Effective, but cold." I shrugged. "I'm pouring myself another cup of coffee. They brought this upon themselves. I'm just making sure they never forget it." As we relaxed into the living room, my phone buzzed with a message from Marion. "Just drove by. The billboards are. Wow. How is Valerie taking it?" I smirked while typing my response. "About as well as one would anticipate. How are you holding up?" Her reaction arrived shortly. "Better than ever. Nicholas called yesterday and begged for another opportunity. I told him he should enjoy prison." I showed Travis the note and he grinned. "Your plan appears to be working perfectly." "It's not over yet," I explained. "My mind is already racing about the next steps, but we're getting there one day at a time." As Travis went, I stood by the window observing Valerie's house. The billboard towered over it, a continual reminder of her infidelity. I felt neither empathy or remorse. Just satisfaction that justice was being given coldly and mercilessly. I allowed them to suffer. I reasoned. Let them feel a fraction of the misery they gave me. This was my vengeance. And I would enjoy every minute of it. despite Valerie's urgent attempts to have it removed. The billboard became a local sensation over the next few weeks. It remained solid, a constant reminder of her betrayal. I observed from a distance as her life unraveled piece by piece. One lovely afternoon as I was leaving my workplace, I literally ran into a woman carrying a stack of paperwork. "Oh, I'm very sorry," she exclaimed, scattering papers over the floor. I knelt to assist her gather them. "No, that was my fault. I didn't look where I was heading." As we stood, our gaze is connected, and I felt a sudden jolt. She was stunning, with gentle eyes and a pleasant smile. "I am Jacqueline," she remarked, holding out her hand. "Philip," I said, shaking it. Philip Harrington's eyes expanded slightly. Philip Harrington was the one who discovered the massive fraud case. I nodded, amazed at her recognition. "That is me." "Wow," she exclaimed, her smile broadening. "I've been watching the case. What you accomplished was outstanding." We ended up getting coffee. Our talk flowed easily. For the first time in months, I found myself truly enjoying someone's company as we parted ways. Jacqueline hesitated. "This may sound overly forward, but would you like to have supper sometime?" I was taken aback. Valerie's betrayal came flooding back to me. But seeing Jacqueline's open, honest expression, I made a decision. I'd enjoy that. I spoke, surprised myself with my sincerity. Over the next 2 weeks, Jacqueline and I became closer. She was everything Valerie was not. Considerate, supportive, or sincerely interested in my opinions and feelings. One evening, as we went across the park after supper, Jacqueline looked at me. "Philip, may I ask you something?" I nodded. Curiously. "A billboard. I know the story behind it. Are you okay?" I remained silent for a bit while analyzing her question. "I am now." I eventually said, "What?" "Valerie and Nicholas did. It almost broke me, but I wouldn't let them win." Jacqueline gripped my hand. "You're aware of your incredible strength. Most individuals would have collapsed." I glanced at her and just saw understanding in her eyes. "You don't believe I went too far?" She shakes her head. "They deceived you in the worst way imaginable. They earned all they received." Her words warmed me and reinforced my resolve. This was a woman who understood and unconditionally supported me. As we continued our stroll, I found myself opening up more, telling specifics about my retribution that I hadn't before shared with anyone. Jacqueline listened closely, providing guidance and support. "You know," she added as we approached my car. "What have you done? It is not only about vengeance. You exposed a criminal and brought justice to light. You should be proud." I drew her closer, feeling a burst of emotion. "Thank you," I said, hoping for understanding as I went home that night. I felt lighter than I have in months. Jacqueline's support had strengthened my faith in my efforts. I had done what was necessary, what was correct. And now, maybe I'd found someone who actually understood and accepted me. The next day, Marian Phillip called me. "I have news," she said. Her voice was full with eagerness. "What is it?" I inquired, reclining back in my office chair. "I've been given a position in New York," she explained. "A fresh start, get away from all of this." I smiled, truly thrilled for her. "That's amazing, Marian. You deserved it." "I could not have done it without you," she said quietly. "You gave me the strength to speak up for myself and demand better." As we talked, I understood how far we'd come from being shattered. Betrayed individuals to becoming stronger, more resilient versions of ourselves. Will you keep the billboard up? Marian asked. I chuckled, sensing a note of mischief in her words. Absolutely. It's become quite a local landmark, you know. We laughed together, full with the satisfaction of justice served and lives repaired. As I hung up, I peered out my office window into the city below for the first time in a long while. I felt completely at peace. Valerie and Nicholas were paying the price for their betrayal. Marian was on to bigger and greater things, as was I. I admit, someone who accepted me, darkness and all. This was my fresh beginning, forged in the flames of treachery and tempered with the cold steel of retribution. And I wouldn't want it any other way. Months had passed since the billboard went up and life had returned to normal. My relationship with Jacqueline was thriving, my business was booming. And the continuous reminders of Valerie's betrayal had subsided into a dull ache. One clear fall morning, while I was reviewing contracts at my home office, my phone rang with an unexpected number. Mr. Harrington, a harsh voice inquired as I spoke. I responded, curiosity piqued. This is Detective Roberts of the City Police. We have a situation with Nicholas Bailey. He is requesting to talk with you. My blood became chilly. What kind of situation? The detective exhaled. He has taken a hostage at the courthouse. He says he won't talk to anyone except you. I stood there immediately, reaching for my keys. I am on my way. My mind raced as I drove to the courthouse. What was Nicholas playing at? He'd received a 15-year sentence for fraud with no chance of release. What was he hoping to gain? The situation in the courthouse was chaotic. Police cars, ambulances and news vans crowded the scene. As I approached the police line, Detective Roberts rushed over Mr. Harrington. Thank God you are here. Bailey is becoming more unstable by the minute. I nodded. What does he want? You? The detective spoke plainly. He says he will only free the captive if you step inside. I took a big breath and weighed my alternatives. Okay, I'll do it. The detective's eyes widened. Mr. Harrington, I cannot ask you to put yourself in danger. I met his stare steadily. You aren't asking. I am offering. This concludes today. Following a brief dispute and a quickly signed waiver, I was equipped with a bulletproof vest and wire. Remember, Detective Roberts replied, as he examined the wire. If things go wrong, we'll be there to listen. Use the code word checkmate. And we'll come in. I nodded, bracing myself for what was coming. As I reached the courthouse doors, I heard a familiar voice say, Philip, wait. I turned to see Jacqueline pushing through the crowd. Her cheeks turned pale with worry. What are you doing here? I inquired as she approached me. I heard on the news. She replied, clutching my arms. You can't go in there. It is too hazardous. I kept her face gentle. I have to. This is my mess to tidy up. She looked into my eyes for a time before nodding. Okay, but promise to be careful. I promise, I said, kissing her briefly before returning to the courthouse. As I entered the building, an unsettling silence surrounded me. My footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as I approached the courtroom where Nicholas was. Hold up. I pushed open the door to see Nicholas pacing feverishly. He holds a gun in his hand. A terrified court clerk was cowering in a corner. The eyes were wide with fright. Nicholas, I spoke quietly, grabbing his attention. The world will face me. His eyes were wild. Harrington, you actually arrived. I spread my hands to show that I was unarmed. I am here now. Let the hostage go. Nicholas laughed. A rough and terrible sound. Oh, it isn't so straightforward. You see, you have ruined my life. It's only fair that I repay the favor. I took a step closer, while keeping my voice calm. Nicholas, your own deeds have damaged your life, the scam, the scandal. Those were your selections. Choices? He spit. I had no choice. Do you think I wanted to cook the books to risk everything? However, in order to maintain Valerie's lifestyle, I had to keep up appearances. I felt a spark of astonishment. Valerie, what does she have to do with it? Nicholas, his expression contorted with bitterness. Everything. She was the one who encouraged me to take risks and cut corners. We deserve the finest, Nicholas. He mimicked with a high-pitched voice. Think big or go home. I assimilate this information. Pieces are clicking into place. So what about the affair? Her concept, Nicholas said, slightly deflated. She claimed it would be exciting. Bring some flavor into our lives. I was an idiot for going along with it. I moved closer. My thoughts raced. Nicholas, listen to me. I understand your anger, but this is not the way. Let the captive go and we can discuss this for a bit. I had hoped he would comply. Then his expression darkened. No, no more chatting. It's time for action. He raised the gun and aimed it directly at my chest. I tensed, preparing to dive for cover. Checkmate, I said, evidently hoping the cops would listen. Nicholas's forehead furrowed with confusion. What? Before he could respond, the doors sprang open. Police rushed in to disarm Nicholas and secure the captive. As they carried Nicholas away in handcuffs, he called out for me. This is not over, Harrington. You will have to pay for this. I saw him leave. I'm feeling both pity and revulsion. Even now, he was unable to accept responsibility for his acts outdoors. I was quickly wrapped in Jacqueline's arms. Thank God you're okay. She whispered into my chest. I held her tightly. The adrenaline of the moment eventually caught up with me over her shoulder. Valerie was standing at the fringe of the crowd. Her face was a mask of shock and shame. Our eyes locked and I knew she'd heard everything. The truth about her role in Nicholas's collapse was revealed. The police escorted us away for statements. I felt a sense of finality come over me. This chapter of my life was finally over. Nicholas and Valerie had wrecked themselves. Their falsehoods and tactics were ultimately exposed. I gazed down at Jacqueline, who was smiling up at me with love and understanding in her eyes. This was my future now. A life based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. My long-held need for vengeance had been fulfilled. Justice had been served coldly and ruthlessly, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ultimately victorious. As we walked out of the courthouse, leaving the mayhem behind, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The game had over, and I had won. Here is the next story. My wife and I have been together for 8 years. Married for the last 5. We met in college. We've both been working hard to advance our jobs and salaries in the few months since our marriage. My wife began gaining weight. She had been overweight before attending college. She had informed me that when she was overweight, she felt inferior to other women and never wanted to go back. 3 years into our marriage, she was 70 pounds overweight. This had an impact on both her self-esteem and our romantic relationship. I managed my weight by going to the gym on a regular basis. I often pushed my wife to join me, but she always declined. She didn't enjoy the weightlifting gym I went to when she reached 75 pounds. In addition, she decided to start attending to the gym she joined. Another more mainstream gym that caters to women. The gym has a lot more treadmills and bikes. They also offered early morning aerobics courses, which my wife took before going to work. After a year, my wife had lost her entire weight and more. My wife's self-esteem was restored. And our romantic relationship improved. After 6 more months, my wife looked better than ever. She was now obtaining a fake tan, letting her hair grow out and dressing more appropriately. She looked great. I was looking forward to loving her more than ever. Unfortunately, our love life dwindled after a few months. Almost nothing. She informed me she was exhausted from her workouts and encouraged me to take care of myself. When she first told me this, I felt like she had spit on me. Now I'm in the traditional rock and hard place. The rock is a trustworthy relationship and the hard place is she cheating? I'm not the type of person who sits around hoping for the best. Duck the rock. If I'm wrong, I'll own it and have to kiss her as an asterisk for a few months, whereas doing nothing invites self-doubt into my life. Life is difficult enough already. I placed a voice-activated recorder in the lining of her purse and enabled location tracking on her phone. Update. I discovered she was simply doing a different style of workout on Tuesday and Friday mornings. On those days at his flat, she was avoiding a trainer at the gym. His name was Jim. He was one of those health fanatics who committed every moment of his life to looking his best and staying as fit as possible. His social media feed was loaded with photos of himself posing, working out or competing in some sort of race. I'm not sure how I manage the next 3 weeks. I was in a mental fog of sorrow, alternately angry and melancholy. I started working out longer in the morning and added a program after work. I felt inadequate and thought that enhancing my appearance would win back my wife. I cleaned up and gained muscle. But my wife was still in the affair fog. She didn't see how ripped I'd gotten. She didn't realize how depressed I was at my lowest point. Screw her financially. Divorce would be easy. We rented an apartment. We had money in our joint bank account. Our automobiles cost approximately the same and were roughly the same age. Our true savings were in her 401k account. My workplace did not provide a 401k. Now for the vengeance I know. Take the moral high road and don't waste your time on things that don't benefit your own life. Do not glance backwards. Move on with your life. Nope. I plan to acquire some personal enjoyment by burning the asterisk and her sweetheart. I believe this to be my personal treatment for never looking back. Once I had completed my plan was straightforward. Their fitness drew them together. I'd take it away from them. Don't allow her profit from her deception. Loverboy had an apartment on the first level that overlooked a pool area. I purchased a camera that you placed into a light fixture. Then screwed the light bulb into it. I pointed my camera at Loverboy's front door. What a surprise. Loverboy was avoiding 3 other women at the gym. They're all married. They didn't even bother to remove their wedding bands. I also discovered that Loverboy did not lock his door when he went to the pool. And a cute neighbor would stop by every now and then to invite him back to her apartment for fun. They had to go to her apartment because she had a young child to watch. They were together for almost an hour. So during one of his visits to her apartment, I went to his apartment and installed cameras in each room. Fortunately for me, He kept USB phone power adapters in each room. I replaced them with USB power adapters that contained motion-activated pinhole cameras. I also connected them to his internet so that they could continuously broadcast to my home computer. I also photographed everything in his apartment. So I watched a few weeks' worth of videos. I have to admit he did avoid the most attractive women in the gym. My wife is an extremely attractive woman. However, two of the other women were far more attractive, even though they were little older. The third woman was my wife's age, but about 20 pounds heavier. All three women paid for his services. My wife didn't pay for his love. She was trading him affection for drugs. I subsequently discovered them, and the bottle described them as human growth hormones. Loverboy was taking human growth hormones and anabolic steroids. On weekends, the pool women would visit his apartment. They would get high from something he provided, then duck. The pool cam showed her ex-husband coming to pick up the child over the weekend. Update 1. So I informed my wife that I had a work trip to Los Angeles. Then I rented a car and drove down to Tijuana. I hired a hooker for the day. My objective was to acquire her many doctors' prescriptions for birth control pills. When I explained what I wanted, she said she had a better approach. She knew a pharmacist who would give her whatever she wanted. She mentioned that all of the girls used him for birth control and Plan B tablets. I inquired if he could offer it in liquid form for a syringe. She responded yes, but it was probably meant for animals. She called him to set it up. I drove her to the pharmacist. She introduced us. I explained what I needed, paid him, and we left. I handed her 4 times the amount she said she made in a day. Remember, I hadn't received any love in almost a year. Lover injected himself with a hidden stash of steroids every few days, using the spare house key I discovered during my first visit. I removed all of the testosterone from his vials and replaced it with estrogen. I went home and replaced all of my wife's human growth hormones with testosterone. Update 2. Nearly 2 months later, my wife began to show the effects. Her muscles became noticeably larger and she began to lose her temper. Her skin also started to break out more frequently. I suggested she use a different tanning spray. Loverboy began to appear noticeably softer. I noticed him looking upset after weighing himself on his bathroom scale. My wife was crazy about him during her weekly visits. She continued until he begged her to stop. He began to take something to help him maintain. My wife first expressed concern that the human growth hormone he was giving her was different or in a higher dose than before. He assured her that this was not the case. Loverboy noticed that he was becoming softer and increased his injections 4 months into his treatment. He lost all of his women, including my wife. He couldn't claim to have lost interest in love. My wife couldn't stop herself from having angry outbursts followed by severe mood swings. She'd then be upset with herself for losing control, followed by crying. Loverboy has lost his job at the gym. When he burst into tears in front of everyone, someone teased him about how much hair he left on the workout machines. According to a friend, he attempted to cry on my wife's shoulder, but she would not allow it. When he tried to beg her again, she lost her temper and kicked him in the stomach. He actually lay on the floor, holding his stomach and crying. My wife stood over him calling him fat and stupid, and she was also kicked out of the gym. Neither Loverboy nor my wife visited the doctor to get tested. I assumed they Had consumed too many illegal drugs to care what a doctor had to say. Loverboy began to develop some nice-looking tea around his asterisk and was losing hair. He finally visited a doctor. Blood tests revealed that he had high levels of estrogen in his system. They suspected his thyroid and surgically removed it. He will be taking hormone treatments for the rest of his life. My wife joined another gym but didn't put in as much effort. She seemed to have lost motivation. Her lover regained all of her weight, began losing her hair and developed an acne rash across her entire back, just like an asterisk on the thighs and face. Now she begged me for love. I told her that I would not fall in love with her until I was certain that her rash was not contagious. I hadn't slept on the same bed with her in months. My wife finally visited a doctor. By this point, the drugs had worn off. My wife was scheduled for an allergist appointment and the doctor gave her some pills to help her depression. My wife's emotional state had reached a low point. The next morning there was an envelope in the front seat of my wife's car. Inside there was a voice recorder, 2 photos and a note. The first image depicted Jim abandoning my wife. The second image depicted my wife injecting herself. The drug label was clearly visible on the drug container. On the table beside her, the letter stated, "I knew you were having an affair with Jim. I have video and audio recordings. I'll give you instructions to leave me $10 and $20. Or I'll go to your husband with the adultery evidence and the police with the illegal drug evidence. I'll contact you later about how to get the money." My wife was listening to the tape in our driveway as I peeked out at her. She heard the sound of her and Jim making love. There was also a conversation in which my wife told Jim that I was a fool. I could tell she was shocked when she heard the tape. The shock was soon replaced by anger. My wife started her car and took off. I observed her she was heading straight to Jim's apartment. While watching the pool camera, I noticed her dog at Jim's door. When he opened the door, she jumped on him and began to hear an asterisk rap from the recorders in his apartment. "Jim, what exactly is wrong with you?" "Wife, you are attempting to blackmail me, Jim. You worthless piece of shit." "I'm trying." "What, wife?" "Blackmail me or you'll tell my husband and the police about my drug use." "Jim, why in the asterisk? LHL, would I do that? I have more to lose than you. If it came out wife as asterisk. Cole, you do not have a wife to lose." "Jim, the drugs. I could go to jail for the drugs." My wife stopped talking and held out the letter. Jim read the letter and said I should. "Sorry, this is happening to you, but it is not me. In fact, I was just packing the last of my things. I am moving back in with my mom and dad till I can find a job and get healthy again." He handed her the letter. My wife finally noticed most of Jim's things were gone or in boxes. She then noticed that Jim had 2 black eyes and a cast from his right knee down. My wife. "What the age asterisk? LL happened to you, Jim? Your husband is not the only husband upset with me." My wife glaring at Jim. "What do you mean, Jim? There are 3 other husbands who keep me up." My wife screaming. "You were ducking 3 other women while you were ducking me." Jim remarked. "I'm sorry," and started to cry. Wrong answer. My wife grabbed his shirt and shot him hard in the nose, breaking it. Jim slumped backwards into his as an asterisk, leaving my wife peering down at him, still holding his shredded t-shirt in her hand. "Wife, I told you you were a fat stupid. If I find out you have anything to do with this throwing the paper at him, I am going to cut off and make you eat it." Jim sat on the floor crying as my wife rushed out the door. That night after work, I could see my wife was angry. I didn't utter a word. I left another letter in her car ordering her to put the money inside a gym bag and leave it in the trunk of her car. When she was at the gym that day, when she got out from the gym, the bag was gone and in its place was a cell phone with a voice disguising device. I called my wife the next day and told her the $10,000 was only a test. I would leave her alone if she would cash out her 401k and give money to me. She lost her temper and told me she would never do that. I thanked her for the $10,000 and wished her a happy divorce. Facing legal penalties and exposing her true character following our failed negotiations. I sent her one of the videos and she eventually gave in. It took her a month to withdraw the money. I told her to leave the money in her husband's trunk and I'd get it while he was at the gym that evening. I told her that she would never hear from me again, especially since she had run out of money according to her GPS. I noticed she was trailing me. I noticed she was parked down the street, keeping an eye on my car. I purchased a case of protein powder, handed the trainer my car keys, and instructed him to place it in the trunk of my car while he did so. I went to work out. When I returned from the gym that evening, I watched her sneak out and check in my trunk. The protein box was there, but the money was gone. A few days later, I brought her to an expensive restaurant to celebrate our anniversary. During cocktails, men must wear jackets and ties, while ladies must wear dresses. I served her divorce papers along with images from her affair. Her first query was, "How did you get these?" I told her I found them on my front seat. After going to the gym, she began crying and told me she loved me and that we could work through this. I told her that the evidence suggested she had been avoiding him for about a year. I'd also heard some of the terrible things she'd said about me. I had even heard she planned to take all of our money and leave with him. She cried and promised to be the best wife a husband could ask for. What? I told her quietly. That's what got us in this predicament. You've shed weight and improved your attitude. And what have you done with it? You avoided me. Now you're back to being a big depressed asterisk and I'm supposed to accept you back. I paused for a few moments and stared at her. You're just overweight and foolish. She sat motionless as my words bounced around in her thoughts. She recognized them but couldn't recall where she'd heard them previously. Then there was recognition in her eyes. She blew up huge as one could imagine. She cried loudly. You son of a bitch asterisk, I'm going to kick you. As she hurled her drink at me. Pulling away from the table and wiping my face, I unintentionally pushed the table into her stomach. She viewed that as an insult. She snatched up her salad and flung it at me. She immediately grabbed a steak knife and lunged over the table, attempting to plunge it into my chest. The tip of the knife slashed through my jacket. I was backpedaling quickly and she was following me. Fortunately, she used the conventional overhand stab and I was able to grab her arm. Two waiters then assisted me in wrestling her to the ground as she yelled that she was going to murder me. We were able to get the knife away and her onto her stomach on the floor. The two waiters sat on her back until the cops arrived. When the cops arrived, she was still furious. When the waiters got off her back, she surprised everyone by springing up and attempting to stab me again with the knife she had been lying on. The police tasered her, handcuffed her and took her away. When the police questioned me, I briefly mentioned that I had issued her divorce papers for adultery. I informed them that I began recording everything after she began ranting at me. I didn't tell them. I started it immediately after my fat foolish statement. After watching the movie, they requested that I provide them a copy. Then they left. Final update. The video proof of the restaurant brawl and her attempt to murder me earned her some jail time. That, together with her evidence of adultery, helped me get a favorable divorce settlement. In fact, I received everything of the cash and assets save her automobile. My wife had misappropriated a significant chunk of our marital assets, including her 401k. The judge told my wife that he felt the missing money, $10,000, and 401k, were in her or her lover's possession. In either case, she was accountable for repaying my owing part. She categorically denied having the money, and her blackmail scenario fell flat. She even tried to blame me for orchestrating it, but she just had accusations. She had to give me alimony for 5 years to make up for the loss from her theft. As for me, I had a fantastic weekend in Las Vegas, and amazingly won about as much as my wife had stolen from me. After paying the tax on $10,000, the $401 came out. I was able to reinvest the funds in my own long-term retirement account. With my ever-improving salary and 5 years of alimony, I was able to purchase my own condo and a pair of really excellent cars. And I still wonder why individuals are so stupid as to breach the confidence of the one they love and trust the most, only to expect that person not to betray them in return.